Hello, everyone. Let me just share this. And okay, guys, please make sure that you have your cameras on. You need all of your cameras on, please. Mm, Okay, guys. So today we're gonna continue working on the speaking section, and we're gonna move on to the next question. Okay, does anyone remember how many questions we had in the speaking section?
Four.
4 questions, exactly. And yesterday we worked on which one?
The task 2.
Exactly.
Question 2.
Task number 2. Okay, so that means that today we're going to be moving on to task number 3. It's our theory class, so we're going to be looking at what the question is about, what you have to do, the strategies to answer it, the template on how to answer it. And I don't think we're going to have time to practice, but we'll do that tomorrow. Okay, guys, so let me share these slides. Okay, guys, so here it is. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but the previous question we said we were going to call it the university question, right? Because it was related to university life and it was related to changes within a certain university. So everything had to do with university. Now, this one is going to be a little bit different. It is no longer that casual, it's a little bit more academic, okay? So for this task specifically, you're going to have a bit of an academic vocabulary, okay, guys? You will see what I mean. Now, the things that you have to do for this task are actually the same that you had to do for the previous one. It's an integrated one, so you're going to have to read something first, then listen to something, and then pretty much summarize everything that you had, okay? So these are the steps. First thing, you will read an article, you'll read a short academic text, you will still have the same time to read it. So it's still gonna be 45 seconds to read the text. Second thing is you will listen to this time, it won't be a conversation anymore, but it will be a lecture. Now, do you guys know what a lecture is? Can anyone tell me? What is a lecture?
It's a kind of class.
Exactly. A lecture, by the way, doesn't mean lectura, right? So it doesn't mean lectura. It doesn't translate that way. A lecture is basically a type of class, as Edvi said. So it is something that you're gonna listen to. It isn't something that you're gonna read, okay? Even though it may sound like that, you're not gonna read that. You're gonna listen to this class where you're gonna have a professor that is a university teacher talk about a certain topic, okay? So first thing is you will read a short passage, you will read a text. Second, you will listen to a lecture. And finally, you will have the same thing. You will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 1 minute to speak. Okay? Is that okay, you guys? Do you have any questions about this, the structure of the task? It is basically the same, right? You read for 45 seconds, you listen to a lecture, 30 to prepare, 1 minute to speak. Okay, guys. Now let's just get to it. Okay, we're gonna go directly to an example so that we don't waste that much time. Okay, guys? Can anyone please read this text for me? Could anyone please read it? What about, okay, Karen, thank you. You can go ahead.
Okay, behavior modification. Individuals often modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the possible consequences of their actions. When an individual learns through experience that a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, that behavior is likely to be repeated. An unpleasant consequence, by contrast, discourage further repetition of their behavior. While this can be observed in experiments, it also occurs frequently in everyday settings. When individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of that behavior.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Okay, guys, so as you can see, it is different than the previous one, right? In terms of content. It may not be as easy to understand as the previous one, mainly because of the vocabulary that you have. So here you're gonna have topics on academic subjects. So maybe you will have something on biology, something on psychology, something on business, or even art, I don't know, okay? But it will be academic, which means that it could be a little bit harder to figure out. Now, the content itself, the structure is always going to be the same for the reading, for the text. If you see here, first thing you have is a title, right? You have this behavior modification title. Now, this is different than the previous task. The first thing that I want you guys to do as soon as you get the text is copy the title. You have to have this on your notes. So it isn't the same as in the previous one. The previous one was just an idea. But in this case, the title is a key part, okay? The title is something that you cannot miss, that you have to mention in your response. So please, first thing you do is copy the title, okay? You copy behavior modification. Now that title is gonna be the topic of everything you're gonna hear and read. Behavior modification is the topic. So it's gonna be a really specific content that you're gonna have to remember, all right? Now, second thing, in this whole text, you have different things. You have explanations, you have details, you have Maybe you can have examples. There are many things that you can find in here. But the only thing that actually matters, the only thing that you're going to have to do when you're reading is look for one specific thing. And that is the definition of the concept from the title. Okay? So in this text, you have to summarize it, you have to come down to one definition. You have to look for that definition of behavior modification, and I guarantee that it will always be there in one or two lines, okay? It won't be longer than that. I know that you see a somehow long text, but the definition is only in one sentence, probably. So can you guys tell me where the definition is here? What is behavior modification according to this text? Where do you see that? What's behavior modification?
I think it's the first sentence.
Okay.
The behavior based on what they have learned about possible consequences of their actions.
Exactly. I agree with you. I think that's the definition too. I mean, you have two sentences, right? It could be the first. Behavior modification is when individuals modify or change their behavior based on what they've learned, right? About the consequences of their actions. Or based on experience, you could summarize. You could choose that sentence, or you could choose the last one too. When individuals change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior, right? Either, both of them are okay. Whichever you prefer is fine, okay? But what I want to say is that you have to find that sentence. Don't try to summarize everything, okay? I'm not trying to come up with my own definition based on what I read. I'm just highlighting one sentence. So that is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to find that sentence that tells you the definition and take a few notes because you will need them. Okay, so take a few notes on the definition. You're gonna write down, first thing was the title, right? So you'll have behavior modification and a few keywords for the definition. So you maybe can have change behavior based on consequences. Okay, and that's it. Is that okay, you guys? Do you have any questions about this so far? No questions? Okay. So remember, when you read, you write down the title, you search for the definition, and you take a few notes. Is that okay? All right, guys. Now, next thing was listening, right? Now you're gonna have to hear something. Remember what is it that you're gonna hear? What was it?
A lecture?
Exactly. You're gonna hear a lecture. Now, in this lecture, remember a lecture is a class. It's a university class. You're gonna hear a professor, okay? Professor basically means teacher, but we call professors those who teach at the university, okay? Teachers are mostly for schools, professors are for university. So you're gonna hear a professor talk about this same topic, okay? So the professor is just gonna continue talking about behavior modification. But what exactly will you have? You will have always the same thing. Let me show you. In the listening, you will always have real life examples of the concept that you read about, okay? So the listening is gonna be about examples for that concept, real life examples. So how you see this behavior modification in action, how you see it in real life, okay? You can have one or two examples. It depends on the topic. For psychology, usually you have one example. We're gonna talk about the topics later, but you can have one or two. Of course, you're gonna have an introduction sometimes. You're gonna have some additional details too. But the most important part for you to hear and pay attention to when you're listening to the lecture are the examples. Okay, that's where your mind should be. And in the reading, we said the title, and its definition, right? So is that okay, guys? Do you have any questions about what you will have in the listening? No? Now, another thing that I want to say before you listen to the lecture is that when you're listening, you have to be an active listener. You're not just gonna hear, I mean, you're not just gonna listen to the lecture because you have to, but you're gonna search for specific things in that lecture. And what are you gonna search for? You're gonna look for basically how this concept relates to the examples that are given to you in the lecture. All right, so you have to look for those examples. And most of the time, you will have a specific part that's kind of illustrating every single thing you had in the reading. So you're probably going to have an example of a person or of animals, of a group of people. You're going to see how they change their behavior, so how they change how they behave, how they act, based on their learnings. So they're probably going to learn something based on their actions, and they're going to change their behavior. You already know what to expect in the listening. That's why it's super important that you guys search for the definition and that you find the correct definition here, so that then when you're listening to the lecture, you know what to expect. Okay, so you know exactly what is the most important part. And it is gonna be how this specific, I don't know, it could be as I was saying, a person, a group of people, or even animals, how they change their behavior based on experience. Okay, guys, that will be the most important part. Not the details, not anything else. So is that okay? Are you ready to listen to the lecture? Yes? Okay, guys, take a piece of paper. You have to take notes. We're gonna play the lecture.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Say there's a little boy or girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning they might, I don't know, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down. You know, just misbehaving in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to.
Okay, so that was the lecture. Now, before we try to break it down and analyze the lecture, can anyone please summarize it for me? What did you guys get from that lecture? What was it about, first of all? Who are these individuals in the lecture? What is the example of the individuals? Who's the professor talking about?
Kids.
They are talking about a boy and a girl that misbehaving on the class. So they he was telling them how to behave. If they do the thing right, they will get a reward, and if they not, they will get punished. Basically that they were behaving.
Okay, great, perfect. I really like that. So you will basically explain how the kids learn what the consequences to their actions are, right? So if they behave well, properly in class, so they get rewarded. That's the consequence for their actions. And if they behave poorly, then they get punished. Okay. Now we know that these individuals, those kids, should modify their behavior. So how is that part? How will they change their behavior? What was their initial behavior and what is the final one? What have they changed?
Because the teacher punished them because they were interrupting the class and talking. I think so. They were interrupting the class, so the teacher punished them, and they start to behave better, and then they get a reward for making better, basically.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andre. So that's right. That's exactly how they change their behavior, right? Initially, they were behaving badly. They were interrupting the teacher and so on. They got punished. So those were the consequences. They learned about those consequences and they modified their behavior, right? They started behaving better. So that is the process of behavior modification. And as you can see, I'm focusing everything that everything that I'm saying that I'm focusing on has to do with the definition that I found, right? Everything has to do with this first line. I'm not really focusing on the details, am I? So that is what you guys have to do. And that's why it's important to first understand the definition and then try to look for the most relevant information in the lecture. Because believe me, you won't have a lot of time to summarize the examples. Now, if we go to the transcript of the lecture, we can see, we can maybe highlight the most relevant information.
Hey, teacher, I believe you're muted. We don't listen to you.
We can listen to you. You're muted, so we're not listening to you. Not, no, no, neither, no, no, right now, no, no.